All right, why don't we get started? It's yeah, it's 6:02, so let's get started. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining the CTBUH New York chapter event this evening. I know it's been a while since we've hosted an event, largely because of COVID. But as you know, if you've been to one of our events or are a member, we try to do a number of these a year, and so it's, I guess, fitting to end 2021 that we're doing an event just before the end of the year. And it's a really exciting presentation that we're going to see tonight, and I'm going to get into introducing our guests in just a bit here. But the development that we're going to be talking about tonight is 175 Park Avenue. And most of you will know it as the Grand Hyatt site, right adjacent to Grand Central at 42nd and Lex. And when I saw a presentation of this project about a year ago, and it really stunned me, it to me epitomizes what we believe in as a council. And I just want to point out a few of these and just so that everyone's aware. First and foremost, if you think about if you're from New York and you know New York, East Midtown has always been an interesting neighborhood. Obviously went through a tremendous revitalization with Grand Central a number of years ago. And with a lot of the focus on the West Side and also downtown at the World Trade Center site, East Midtown is, I wouldn't say it's lost its way, but it sort of needed some new energy. And of course, One Vanderbilt, and what is happening at the JP Morgan Chase site. If you haven't seen that, it's worth driving by to take a look or walking by it. But sort of putting a new there in East Midtown, I think is really, really critical. And this project does that. And so it's this kind of notion that tall buildings play a big role in revitalizing and creating new ideas and new energy in the city. I think the second is that if there was ever a project that was the epitome of transit-oriented development, it would be Grand Central and all of the spaces around it. And this project is working very carefully with the public sector and the transit authority, et cetera, to really kind of unwind the hairball that exists underneath Grand Central and under the Grand Hyatt site. And that's incredible amount of work that's being done there to improve the public transit and access to transit. I think the other is that our moniker, Council on Tall Buildings and Urban Habitat. Oftentimes the urban habitat piece is not as engaged in the discussions that we have. And I think this is a project that you will see is very much engaging in the urban environment. It's obviously a tall building, but how this building meets the street and the multiple levels that exist around Grand Central, I think is really important. And then I think the last is that this is a building that is really looking at the workplace of the future and how people will use tall buildings in unique and inventive ways. So those are what I thought were really important for our organization and for all of you to join and listen. And so let's go to the next slide. I want to introduce our speakers. And again, my sincere thanks to this group to come and speak with us tonight, to take their time. First off, John McMillan, who's the Director of Development from TF Cornerstone. Also Adam Green, who's the Senior Vice President of Development with RXR. Those two groups have partnered together to co-develop this project. And then we have their architect, Skidmore, Owings and Merrill, who is being represented by Kim Van Holtzbeke, and he's going to walk through portions of the design. I'm Tim Johnson. I'm the chairman of the New York City chapter, was also the chairman of the council from 2011 to 2014. I've had a long history with the council. I'll be helping moderate, as well as Nick Sundholm, who's the president of our New York chapter. Let's go to the next slide. Before we start, I just want to, if you're new to the organization, the Council on Tall Buildings is a little bit over 50 years old. We are a not-for-profit organization, and I think what makes us very unique is that we're multidisciplinary. We have architects, engineers, building owners, operators, suppliers, manufacturers, insurers, anyone that's involved in tall buildings as part of the council. And we do have a global network that supports and makes up our council. And we would like to, if anyone's on the call that would like to be a member of the council, we'd love that. In fact, if we go to the next slide, there's a number of things that we do. This is a good example of where we reach out to our community and help display and showcase projects that we think are exemplary of what we believe. We convene multidisciplinary events throughout the year around the world. At the core of what the council is, it's about sharing best practice information. We've become a bit of a clearinghouse for anything regarding tall buildings. And I think really the last is that we are the body that's typically sought out for tracking and reporting the height and building data. If you go to ctbuh.org, if you go to the next slide, you can get more information, including membership. And also just one last word is that this hour that we'll spend together does qualify for CEUs. If you want, you can send, actually, I think what will be happening is you will, if you've registered for this, you will get a form at the end of the presentation that you can send in and get credit for your CEUs. So without any further ado, I want to turn it over to John McMillan, and they are going to walk through their presentation. Again, really appreciate everyone showing up. And John, I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you, Tim. And thank you all for letting us join you tonight and for giving us the opportunity to present what we think is a pretty spectacular building. And as Tim mentioned, it is a little bit unusual in that it's a collaboration between two major New York City developers, RXR, Adam's here from RXR, and TF Cornerstone. I think both firms are trying to spread the risk around a little bit. And then we're also joined by Kim from SOM, our sort of classical modernist architect, who was sort of the obvious choice for this project from the very beginning. And we're just finishing up about a 2-year public approval process. In about a week, we'll be through the city council. Next slide, Tim. Kim. Next slide. So the story here begins at the beginning of the de Blasio administration when they put in place new zoning for East Midtown. And the purpose of this zoning was specifically to promote the development of new large-scale 21st century office buildings. But the problem in Midtown, of course, is that there were no development sites. And so the zoning had to find a way to help induce developers to take down existing office buildings and put up new ones. And that's a very hard economic equation to satisfy. And so the way the zoning does that is by creating developments of a large enough scale that it becomes worth the developer's while to take down an existing building. And so the way that's done is you can earn bonuses through transit and public space improvements, but also through purchasing landmark air rights that can kind of float freely around the district. So that's how we were able to get the FAR for this development. Next slide. So our site is next to Grand Central Terminal, just on the right, of course. Grand Central was always seen as kind of the center of Manhattan's premier office district, a place appropriate for density. And the reason for that, of course, is that it has so much infrastructure built into it on many, many different levels. You can see the viaduct that surrounds Grand Central in both of these images. Then the street level, and then, you know, several levels below grade of commuter and subway rail lines. All of that stuff extends underneath our site next door. So we had to kind of deal with all of that from the very beginning. The site, as you can see, go ahead, Kim. On the left, the site sits at the confluence of both regional commuter rail lines and the city's subway system. So the Long Island Railroad and Metro North coming in from upstate in Connecticut come right into this site and join together with the city's several subway lines, literally underneath our site. And on the right, you can see our site in orange. And then in the middle of that image are the kind of the black and white train lines coming in from Connecticut and upstate New York. Then the yellow lines, these are the new Long Island Railroad lines that are being brought in through East Side Access. And then the green is the 456 subway line that transitions from Lexington over to Park Avenue, literally under our site, and the station is on that diagonal underneath our site. And then the last thing is you can see that sort of semicircular turnaround rail line is also still in operation for Metro North. So these are all the things that we had to dance around in placing this building on the site. Next. So this is a site today, the Grand Hyatt Hotel. It was Donald Trump's first project in New York, about 1979, 80, and he acquired the old Commodore Hotel and just sort of slapped a glass skin on it. It's essentially a big H shape that sort of sits on several levels of sort of ballrooms and that sort of thing. Next slide, Kim. It's built out to the property line, no public realm, very much sort of crowds the public realm around the building, as well as all the landmarks that this site is adjacent to. Next slide. So you can see that it's very crowded on all sides of it. On the left is Lexington Avenue. On the right is the viaduct that separates the site at the upper level from Grand Central Terminal. Next slide, Kim. And then inside, this is what's called the 42nd Street Passageway, which is the kind of the main feeder into the 42nd Street subway station below, probably, you know, the most congested subway entrance in the whole system. And on the image to on the left, that's our site that runs along the left-hand wall of the 42nd Street Passage, and then it's taking people into the subway that cuts into our site, which you can see on the right-hand side. So this was one of the big, obvious problems that we had to deal with from the outset of this project. Next slide, Kim. So this is a kind of a scenario of the building. It's about 2 million square feet of zoning footage, much more gross square footage, and about a 500-room hotel that sits at the top of the office building, which is a pretty unusual format for New York City. And then you can see the building terraces back so that we're able to create floor plates of different sizes on each level. Each one of those setbacks is outdoor public space. And then all of this sits on several levels of public realm and transit improvements at the base. And then you can see the way the building tapers in at the base. That has a lot to do with the structural system that Kim is going to explain, but it also presents the opportunity to create the public realm that you'll see. Next. So Grand Central Terminal, you know, this is kind of the context that we had to deal with, both the public realm here and the transit connections that are fundamental to Grand Central. That passageway that you see on the right there, that's leading into our site. So, you know, the connections to this site were very much instrumental part of our project. Next slide, you can see the ground plane and how we are completely plugged into Grand Central. So that's Grand Central in the middle of the scheme image. Our site is on the right side, and then you can see One Vanderbilt over on the left-hand side, separated by a new public space that's just been opened. But unlike One Vanderbilt, we are plugged into Grand Central. There's no separation between us and the terminal, and many of its sort of circulation corridors literally come through our site, like the Lexington Passage, and then all three of the major entrances into the subway station below cut into our site. So we've been working with all of those. Next slide. And then this is below grade, and so you can now begin to see the infrastructure that we had to deal with below grade, the subway station itself, and then that that turnaround loop for Metro North, leaving us with not a lot of terra firma or, kind of bedrock access to bring the structure of the building down to bedrock. So those two red areas along 42nd Street were the only landing points we had for the structure. And so that, kind of became a partie for the project and very much began to define the architectural form of the building, which Kim will show you a little bit later. And by the way, that's such a fundamental part of the project that as we went through the public approval process that we're just finishing here, people really kind of enjoyed understanding the engineering challenges of this site and how that kind of expressed itself in the architecture of the building. And I think that's one of the reasons why we had good success in the public approval process, because people just kind of got what this building was about and enjoyed understanding it. Next. So this is the proposed ground floor of the building. So you can see all along the left-hand side of our site, we've created a new transit hall that is adjacent to that crowded 42nd Street passageway I showed you earlier. That transit hall leads you into a new at-grade foyer for the subway station below. All the turnstiles that are now on the mezzanine below, kind of clogging up circulation space, have now been brought up to grade. There's a new entrance into this subway station directly from 42nd Street. And then we're completely rebuilding the Lexington passageway where it is today, but at a much taller scale. And then we're adding a completely new subway entrance, what's called the R239, that is on axis with that subway station below, that's all turned at a 45-degree angle to the site. So that very much sort of improves the legibility, because that subway station entrance is now in line with the station below. So it helps you to understand it better when you get down below. And then the next slide shows you the improvements below grade. So now we're at the mezzanine level. Site is still outlined in red, and all of the green stuff here is sort of structural girders holding up the old Commodore Hotel. And because the subway station is built on a kind of a different grid than the subway, these are all sort of transferring the structure from one grid to the other. We are going to be able to remove all of that and open, all of this is kind of causing congestion and chaos in the subway station. People can't find the staircases. They don't know where they're going. So we're able to lift all that green stuff out of there. We're also able to remove all of the turnstiles that were clogging congestion before. And you can see where this new subway entrance is coming down with the kind of the green line. That's a new staircase, new elevator, taking people into the middle of the station, so they're now evenly distributed throughout all of those staircases. And then off to the right is the new staircase kind of at the end of the axis of the station, taking people up to Lexington Avenue, also bringing daylight. Both of these entrances are now bringing daylight down into the mezzanine level. Next. And then we reached off the site to make improvements, and we found a way to make use of abandoned rail tracks and some kind of old storage room, so that we were able to create a connection, a direct connection from the Metro North line and from the new East Side Access line into the mezzanine level of the subway station. So now all of these people have to go up into the terminal and then come back down through those crowded subway entrances. So we're going to be able to take about 4,000 people per rush hour, out of those subway entrances and bring them directly from the regional rail lines into the subway system. Next. So here is a view of the transit hall that we're creating. We do have the opportunity to introduce skylights that will bring natural light into the transit hall, and we've been able to align those skylights in a way so that they will open up architectural features of the eastern facade of Grand Central Terminal. One of the controversial things that we've dealt with as we went through the public approval process was whether or not this wall between our transit hall and the 42nd Street passageway should be completely open so that the two spaces are joined, or should we kind of preserve the kind of the regular entrances that Grand Central has and maintain the distinctiveness of the historic 42nd Street passageway. And the historians seem to come down on the side of maintaining the distinction of the 42nd Street passageway. So that gave rise to this rhythm of entrances that are aligned with other rooms and other entrances like Vanderbilt Hall within Grand Central Terminal. Next. So here is a cross-section through that transit hall, and because we are pulling our building back from the property line, we are able to create this open space around the site, and that's where this section is taken, so that we now are able to pop up these skylights, create views of the eastern facade of Grand Central Terminal, and introduce this new public realm that Adam and Kim, that's at an elevated level that Kim and Adam are going to take you through a little later. Oh, and then in this image to the left, you can see the new entrance directly out to 42nd Street, and then the new staircase taking people down to the mezzanine level. Next. Now we're outside on 42nd Street. So off to the left is the existing entrance into that 42nd Street passage. Then to the right is the new entrance we're creating into the subway station and to our transit hall. Then of course you can see on the right, one of these structural touchdown points, and how we very much expressed that and very much made that evident to everyone what's going on. And I think that's one of the things that the public has enjoyed about this project. So Kim will talk about that a little bit later. And then there's also this public realm up at the level of the viaduct. Now we are in the transit hall looking south towards 42nd Street. So we're bringing light in through this new opening onto 42nd Street, and you can see all the turnstiles have been brought up from the mezzanine below and are in this transit hall now. Next. And then this is a cross-section of the Lexington passageway that kind of runs along the northern edge of the site. And so again, that dotted line is the red line is the current height of the Lexington passage. We're going to be about doubling that. And then you can see sort of two levels of public realm above that. But I also wanted to point out in the middle of the Lexington passage will be a new entrance to our office building next to the subway station. A new entrance to our office building. We think about half of the tenants of the office building will come in through this entrance directly from Grand Central Terminal. And because of all of that transit infrastructure underneath our site, we can't bring the elevator pits below grade. So it's one of those buildings where the office lobby has to be lifted up above grade because of that constraint below grade. Next. Then this is outside on Lexington Avenue. You can see the existing condition on the left-hand side, and on the right, the glass area on the right-hand side is the new entrance into the Lexington Passage. And then next to that is the new entrance that we're creating to the subway, completely recessed. And then there's also a staircase going up to the public realm that Kim is going to describe later. Next. And then here's a little detail of that. So we're able to create sort of pedestrian circulation space before you go down into that subway. Also waiting area for the handicap elevator that'll take you down. And then this staircase that's kind of wrapping up around one of these structural touchdown points that are expressed all the way around the building. Next. And then inside, this is the new Lexington Avenue entrance that we're creating on the right. And then on the left is the existing exit that takes you up into the Lexington Passage that I believe, the MTA has just improved that. That will remain in place, and we're just going to add the new entrance that you see here on the right. And then next. And now I'm going to turn it over to Kim for some architecture.
Thank you, John. Great. So this gave you a sense of all the opportunities that we saw to the transit to leverage our site and add benefits to the larger transit system. And so obviously now we have to walk you through how the building really, what the building is that sits on top of this. And first and for all, we wanted to start off with pointing out the extraordinary context that this building is sitting in. It's basically surrounded by great landmarks of a variety of architectural expressions on all sides. And so that was really a big influence in how we responded designing the building, as well creating opportunities to improve the public realm, not just the transit that John just talked through, but on another aspect. And so first for all, symmetry was really key in how we looked at this building because of the context and because our direct adjacency to the Grand Central Terminal, the Beaux-Arts building that is very much organized around symmetry throughout the planning and the elevation. Secondary, we, as all New York buildings, we wanted to really tie into that vernacular of architectural towers with a classical setback rhythm that provided daylight to reach down to the street and the adjacent buildings and landmarks, and then also leverage those setbacks to, in current workplace environment, to create those as opportunities for either tenant or public realm public outdoor spaces. So see the ones in the tower, opportunities for the tenant. The one at the grade there at the viaduct is where the opportunity really lies in really transforming the public realm for open space. On top of that, the tower is really expressed through its structural system. We really felt strong that this is not a glass building, a glass, you know, like the West Side has a lot of them. In this context, with so much architectural expression and materiality, we felt making this building have materiality and depth allowed us, you know, we wanted to express the structure as an outboard element that created depth, and then the metal expression of it brought material to the building. That structure that then became the DNA of the building had to terminate at the top and at the bottom. On the bottom, really tying into those side constraints that John walked you through of where the structural elements can come down and tie into the bedrock. And at the top, how it terminates, since it's a very tall building, and how it's contributing and registering in skyline. And so that expression of the body of an external vertical system of column expression and its bundling at grade and its weaving at the top really became the highlights and of the identity of this tower, really resulting in an addition to the ever evolving skyline of New York, which is really part of what New York City is about, tracking back, you know, the last 100 and 150 years. Every decade, there's a new addition, a new changing element that contributes to that beautiful skyline that is known around the world. But it also tied into creating new office space within the historical Midtown business district that meets the needs for the 21st century workplace. And so really leveraging that opportunity to create that opportunity and positioning Midtown in that larger worldwide competitive landscape. At the base, the building really bundles to those structural elements, but it was really an opportunity as well to create scale and definition and texture to the street wall. As I mentioned, it was defined primarily about where the touchdown comes down. It forced us and created an opportunity to pull the building inboard from the property line, creating more space between our building and our neighbors at that critical street level. And then that brought the opportunity to create new public accessible space. The weaving of the structure as it comes down to the touchdown points is then tailored to relate to our neighbors, either the setback of Chrysler or the crown or the statue of Grand Central, and really get another layer of texture and scale that's appropriate to create that New York City street wall expression before it meets the ground. And as the building pulled back because of structural reasons and our ability to give up that space to the city again, it really created an opportunity to create a unique public realm of a 360 wraparound public space that had basically elements facing Chrysler, facing the Gray Bar, facing Grand Central, as well as tying back down to the sidewalk level and to the natural pedestrian circulation paths. The blue is then the elevated lobby for the office tower. But you can see in the center there, the access that comes off the Lexington Passage, bringing office workers up, as well as an entrance off of 42nd, but surrounded by this public outdoor space. Besides the opportunity of public realm improvements as a physical space and creating texture, it also allowed us to really improve the general street experience along 42nd and Lexington. Here's a picture of what the condition is to date. Grand Hyatt sits on the property line, really from 42nd and Lex corner view here, disguises and kind of hides Grand Central. And the restaurant shed that actually extends over the sidewalk and really imposing a density of building on the sidewalk. An as of right scheme would have to comply with that same criteria to build on the property line. But our solution, driven by the structural constraints, by pulling the building in, allowed us to massing-wise reveal Grand Central from this critical intersection, but also not just reveal it, the massing, allow these great windows that will provide see-through abilities to the eastern facade of Grand Central for the very first time from 42nd. Here, a rendering standing on 42nd Street towards the corner with Lexington, and you look across, you see the main entrance, you see the core, you see the grand space that allows a relationship to the Grand Central building. You see the eastern facade of Grand Central, and you really can appreciate, and the revealing of Grand Central is much more prominent as one walks along 42nd Street. It allows us to create that new outdoor space on the west side, right next to Grand Central Terminal on the viaduct level, and creates an opportunity for general public to come up close to the Grand Central Terminal architectural expression. Here a view where we're standing at the Park Avenue Viaduct Bridge right behind us, looking east. In a similar manner, the building pulls back, creates more breathing space, as well as starting to see through views towards a Chrysler building. And on the corner here, again, our building pulls back, revealing the Chrysler podium and Lexington much more open. And as I mentioned, that public space created at the viaduct level on the second floor is really tied back to the 42nd Street pedestrian traffic. Two grand stairs flanking the entrance come down to grade and create a very gentle and inviting staircase up to those two terraces, and seeing greenery or Grand Central, depending which side you're looking at, is really your visual cue of what you're going to find there. The Chrysler Terrace on the east side of our building overlooks Lexington. You kind of are elevated above the hustle and bustle that this Midtown corner really has, creates a place of repose, quietness, lush trees, and a point of overlook to where you really, for the first time, can appreciate the Chrysler building's entry and facade in a quiet moment. The view, again, 42nd towards the east, looking west, where you really can see this larger Chrysler Terrace, the lush, large-scale trees as kind of a destination public space to go and sit in a park away from the hustle and bustle. And with that, really a transformative change of what we know as the Lexington facade conditions, with a much more permeable, public-oriented facade with the Grand Central Terminal entrance, a third stair leading you up to the Chrysler Terrace, right adjacent to the MTA entrance, with then the large-scale trees and canopy right above us as an inviting sign to come up. Concluding again with that 42nd Street elevation, Grand Central on the left, the symmetry kind of relationship with the Grand Central to our building, and the two flanking staircases that really lead you up to the two east and west terraces. As you can see, the challenge really became an opportunity for the building, for the public realm, the transit, and the public space. This very unique public space is a connected space of a series of outdoor spaces that are tied back seamlessly to the pedestrian street level. Chrysler to the east, Graybar to the north, one level up, and then back down to the Grand Central Terrace, which is more adjacent to the new facade exposure of Grand Central, and then keep leaping back down. Since we go over different levels, connectivity and a vertical circulation was key, not just from an experience, but also for all use. So we have a series of staircases. They're all broad and inviting, starting with the 2 civic stairs along 42nd Street, a stair right at the Lexington passage entrance onto Lexington underneath comes up to Chrysler Terrace. That brings you around to another stair to the Graybar that brings you back down to Grand Central Terrace. Adjacent to all of these points, we have in pink here ADA elevators so that these spaces are fully ADA accessible and inviting, as well as kids with strollers and families. The space itself is not just a space to look at these great landmarks all surrounding it, but is also programmed through a series of rooms, some more focused on viewpoints to the landmarks, some more focused on being able to sit and relax and just enjoy the moment on their canopy. Adam will go much more detail of all those particulars. And then intertwined into this really a circuit of public spaces, an idea of culture, art, and activities will be planned throughout the space. And really culminating, which was as a baseline a requirement of 10,000 square feet of public space on a site footprint that is only 57,000 square feet, we were able to leverage the site in addition to all the transit to accommodate about 25,000 square feet of public accessible outdoor space, which when you look at it on a site of 57 is an amazing feat. And we're very excited about that. And that all tied to the natural street level and the natural flow of people. And with that, I'll hand it over to Adam, who will walk you in much more detail about all these qualities.
Thanks, Kim. I think it's an amazing overview and introduction to what the public open space is. And so I'll try to dive a little bit into it, but just to dwell for a moment on that last statement, you know, a half an acre of public open space at this location in the city is just something that's, we feel like a tremendous public benefit. And it's not only a public benefit, we think it's a tremendous differentiator for the kinds of tenants and the things that people are looking to in the future when they look to where they're going to want to be in an office building. And so, you know, for the public realm, we took an enormous amount of care in delving into this. So I'll jump in a little bit more detail on these terraces. If you go to the next slide, please, Kim. So Chrysler Terrace, as Kim mentioned, is the largest. This is about 10,000 square feet of that 25,000. And it was programmed with high canopy trees, fixed and movable seating. And the general intention here is that these are the social spaces that can encourage interaction. If you could go to the next one, please. You know, we take advantage of that scale, that 10,000 square feet along Lexington. You can see on the plan here, the terrace is anchored with a large growth of trees to the east. You can see moments of overlook all the way on the corner there. And these trees lower the scale and gives people in the terraces shelter from the sun and wind. At the center, there is the reflecting pool that's on axis with the center of the Chrysler building that sort of, you know, draws that relationship in from across the street to our building and is directly, you know, visible from our lobby. We think the entire experience of being in a building lobby and being surrounded on, you know, 3 sides by public open space and then, you know, across 42nd Street with the incredible landmarks is something else that's entirely unique. Next slide, please. Again, here is the southeast corner, looking across the street from that perch over 42nd and Lex, the Chrysler building on the left, Saucony mobile building across the street on the corner. Next slide. You can see again here, trees are interrupted in the center with this water feature that is, as I pointed out, centered on the Chrysler building, which you can see better in the following slide where you're really looking directly east. It's very formal. Again, the high branching trees, really defining the space, giving it a canopy. Let's go to the next slide. You're moving north. Here you're looking south. This is that stair that comes up from Lexington you start to see again the variety and design of the types of spaces we're creating, even with the furniture. So that's another thing that's very important to us, is that there's a real scale and texture to this that is changing. If you turn around and go to the next slide, now you imagine facing to the north from the same location. You see the stairs on the left that take you up to what we call the Gray Bar Terrace. That's the one across the north side of the building. And then there's a small cafe that's nestled in the back that also would connect into the lobby. Now the next terrace is the Gray Bar Terrace. This is this dynamic connector, we call it. It's a circulation. It's at another 15 feet elevated above the terraces that are the Chrysler Terrace in the east and Grand Central in the west. So it connects them, but it also offers opportunity for programming. It has the most sort of flexible space in that respect. So the plan of this, if you see on the next page, again, we're north at the top of the page. All year long, there'd be a concession that would activate it in the middle. You can see that that pavilion that'll be sculptural in design. To the east, again, there's another overlook and a I'm sorry, Kim was highlighting the communal table there under those 3 trees, which again, we think about, and I'll get to in a minute, the cultural programming that was a big part of how we're thinking about this, the art and cultural programming. We thought about different elements that could become pieces of public art. They could become places where there's communal gatherings. That's there on the east side. And then on the west side, it's a little bit more flexible with the, some fixed seating along the north, but also movable seating that this space could transform and become used for many different activities. On the next slide, again, this is that overlook looking south over the cafe and over the Chrysler Terrace. To the next slide, just zoomed in again, you see that that small sculptural pavilion, the flexible zone on the left and the fixed zone on the right. On the next slide, you can see what this looks like from the top of those stairs looking west towards Grand Central. Again, these art pieces are placeholders. We're really looking forward to the process that we'll go through with the Public Art Fund, who we've brought on to work with us on this to select the right pieces and really write a brief and commission site-specific work for this space. Go to the next slide. Looking east, this is the communal table that's focused around trees that will be growing out of the center of it. And then on the following slide, you see this really flexible space at the northwest end that can feature active programming, whether, again, if you go to the next slide, it's outdoor fitness or movie nights or cultural programming and different types of events. And one of the things that we went through as we went through our entitlements, you can go to the next slide, Kim, just because it's a beautiful image, is we spent a lot of time doing outreach. We spoke to 47 cultural organizations over the last 6 months, which was something that as we started to think about how one would program, how one would activate, we realized that the variety of the spaces themselves, I think if you remember back to the Axon Kin show that showed all the little different rooms broken down, the scale of these spaces is unique and it lends itself to many different types of programs. So whereas this one could be a nighttime event for a concert, we have other places which, might be useful for different kinds of activities, whether that's community crafts or whether that's a fashion show, if you're using all of them in a circuit. So all of these organizations we spoke to with our cultural partner, who is Lord Cultural Resources, help to inform, the thinking of how the potential of this could really be tremendous. The next space is the Grand Central Terrace. And this is really designed to capitalize on those views that Kim mentioned, the eastern side of Grand Central, which nobody really experiences right now because it's the awful view of the Hyatt on the right to the east, and then the beautiful view of Grand Central to the west, but there's no pedestrian access up there, so you're just moving through in a car. If you go to the next slide, please, you can see that the terrace is really anchored by those 3 skylights that John referred to in the beginning when we were speaking about the transit hall and bringing that light down to below. And these provide that light. And there's 2 flush skylights and 1 extruded skylight that really characterize this space. On the next slide, you can see that plan. It's smaller than the others. It has much more intimate and smaller scale seating zones. Again, you see in the center of the plan, access off the lobby. That's okay, go to the next one. This is a view looking north, Grand Central on the west, building entrance to the lobby is on the east side, on the right. And the next one is another view of that. And again, the space here was organized as a series of rooms, benches for visitors to sit facing Grand Central or to sit facing each other. It's very thoughtfully programmed. The next view is looking south at the viaduct. And here, on the following slide is really the collective, right? It's a similar palette across the different terraces, but it's very responsive to the context with these different individual characters that are promoting these different individual expressions. And it's been just a tremendous experience, I think, for all of us to work through this with field operations as they've brought a lot of the they've brought all of these different design ideas to life through the experimentation and the programming and looking at how it would really function through a lot of their experience. On the next slide, I think we've seen these renderings before. It's another view of that. And then following again is just a recap of our partners. I think that what's extraordinary about the Public Art Fund is that their belief that art should be available for everyone and free, and that the city is really a canvas and a platform for artists. And so there's a really important element of civic dialogue that we'll be able to work with them there to apply here. And then again, with Lord, I talked about the real programming opportunities. So to wrap up the next section, which I'll jump into past this slide, Kim, we're really thrilled about this project. Both organizations, RXR and TF Cornerstone, and really SOM, have deep roots and commitments to New York City. And I just wanted to talk a little bit at the end of our view on why New York City is the best place to be in the world and our belief in New York City's resiliency. So this is a little bit less of the beautiful design talk, and these slides are not nearly as pretty as what we just went through, but I wanted to go through some data. And this is from September. So this is all post Delta variant, but not really factoring in the last couple of months and any situation we're looking at now with Omicron, but hopefully that doesn't really set us back. So I think what we wanted to highlight here is that the world's knowledge-based companies really recognize that they must have a presence in New York City in order to attract the best and brightest talent. This city is the largest in the United States. It's the second largest metro economy in the world. And New York City has a diverse economy in that we aren't focused on one industry, right? We think about what's changed dramatically over the last decade and a half and how life sciences and tech are now drivers of New York City office space. It's not just a city of banking and financial institutions. And compared to global cities and the issues that they face, it's still the best place in the world to do business. On the next slide, transit ridership in New York City is reaching, again, as of September, I don't have the latest, I didn't redo these, about 60% of our pre-pandemic levels. And that's the highest recovery out of all major US cities in terms of public transit. Major transit systems across the country on average are at about 30% of pre-pandemic levels. So it's again a testament to New Yorkers. We've been through this, we've recovered, we're going back out. That on the next slide really is highlighted by the fact that we're open for business, right? Our primary and secondary schools are open for in-person instruction. Thank goodness, I can't do it anymore. Kids are happy to be back. The major cultural institutions, the Met Gala was held, Tribeca Film Festival resumed, holding in-person events, and museums and Broadway have reopened. I work in Rock Center. The Christmas tree lighting was packed. The streets are packed. And every day, the Radio City Music Hall line is around the block. And you really have to fight through to get onto the subway to get home. So that's all good news. Our streets are back. And while international tourism is down, I think you can go to the, oh, sorry, this is the right one. While international tourism is still down, domestic tourism is actually up to 86% of pre-pandemic levels. So again, I think to be out on the streets in New York, you just might hear more English than you used to, but I think everybody will be back soon enough. On the office leasing side, which is kind of germane to this project, velocity has really increased between the second quarter and third quarter of 2021, went up by a third. It still remains 30% below pre-pandemic levels. But something that's very important for us on this project is that nearly 73% of the new leases that have been signed in 2021 have been within Class A product, right? That's higher than the share it was previously. So there's a flight to quality. This happens after these downturns. People are focused on new buildings. So new is the new location in real estate, and 175 Park is really new and location. So that's where, again, we feel tremendously optimistic about our ability to rent this building and build this. Again, the premiums that you see in Class A product is a significant premium over the lower quality products. We can skip this one, as I think we're running out of time. I want to get to Q&A. Again, attractive office space is the new normal. Reimagining the workplace to create a highly curated destination. We want interaction. We talked about everything we're doing downstairs, but we'll also be doing it inside the building. Engagement, culture, a sense of purpose. This is about amenities, and we'll have that in the building. It's about quality of the spaces. I mentioned before, continued flight to quality. And One Vanderbilt, you know, a building that's obviously directly related to this project across Grand Central to the west, a building that, you know, is all about quality landlord, quality of location, quality of the building itself. Was 67% leased at the beginning of pandemic, and now it's close to 100% leased, and achieving rents that are the highest in the market. So there's really an acceleration here of the haves and the have-nots, and, you know, competitive obsolescence for a lot of the old New York City office product that, you know, will need to be transformed. Again, people are coming back. Hopefully we get them back sooner. The governor is out asking employers to mandate staff returns. It's important that a thriving city of office workers are in their office so that the jobs that support them on the street can come back as well, and we can all stop working from home. So our office occupancy is up to about 30+%. You know, hopefully we will be pushing that even higher and higher. On the residential side, folks are back. Rental vacancy is down to 2% after ballooning to 10% in January last year. January earlier this year. Concessions are down, and New York City is now ranking #1 for 2021 move-ins. And another indicator that people are coming back is the condo market, where luxury sales are up and bidding wars are increasing. So again, just to sort of sum this up, we are on the cusp of a full recovery, and everybody was premature. And I think writing our obituary, and it's good to sort of feel that energy in the streets. The city's back. It's different, but, you know, its success is based on the fact that it's always going to be a magnet for talent, and the talent is coming back. You know, the city is 85+% vaccinated, so we are continuing to make progress there. And you see it in our wrap up. You know, the last slide here again. If you've read and followed the real estate news in New York, companies like Google and JP Morgan and Pfizer and Disney and Amazon continue to make additional commitments to growing in New York. So, you know, we are thrilled to be at the end of our approvals now, and we get to move forward with this project, as, you know, Kim mentioned when he was showing that skyline shot, as a beacon for what the future of New York City office will be. It's sort of our, you know, chance to make a real generational impact on the skyline of Midtown and look for the future. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Adam, John, Kim, really. And I saw a few images in this presentation that I hadn't seen before, and it's, every time I look at it, it's such a wonderful project. And I appreciate the bonus that you added at the end about the city. And I agree. I've actually seen the ridership personally increase considerably since December 1st. I think a lot of companies had a December 1 return to work. And I think a couple of things you mentioned, I think, are important. One, I think a group like this is really interested in seeing tall buildings being successful, right? So a lot of the things that you talked about in terms of the ground plane, I have not seen a building in New York or even in a dense urban environment that has gone through so much to bring the public in and around the building and actually enhance the urban environment to the degree that you have. The second part of that is, I call it the software of buildings. You know, I think we're beyond the day when people build a building and they kind of simply operate it by having a person at the front desk. Buildings that are successful these days are about, how do you do the social programming? I call it the software. And I think you've created a lot of software in your project. And a point that you made about how the city keeps growing is really important. New York City is now the largest home to tech companies, square footage wise, even beyond Silicon Valley. And that's just going to keep changing. And we know that those users have different needs. And I think a lot of what you've shown plugs right into that. So I think it's a great project in so many ways, but what I want to do is open it up for any questions. I see a few here in the chat. Let me just go through them kind of one by one. Scott asks a question. Does the subway elevator on Lexington go up to the second floor terrace as well?
No,
No.
they're separate elevators. There are ADA elevators taking people from grade down to the subway, and then we have separate elevators that are taking people from grade up to the terraces.
Okay. Another question by Steve. What is the timeline moving forward for the project? When is it expected to start? When is the expected start of demo, new construction, and completion?
So the timeline for the project, obviously you see a project like this, it's lengthy. It's going to take a while to do that demolition. So, our timeline is to work on that in 2023. And, the building is going to take 18 months to take down. And then construction is going to take, quite a while. So we think that this building is, getting ready for the later years of the 2020s and sort of open by the end of the decade.
Okay. Nick, do you have any questions? Or others that have questions, feel free to put them in your chat. Nick, while we're waiting for any others, do you have any questions?
Sure. No, I just would reinforce again my sentiment, or the sentiment you shared, and the vibrancy and energy of New York City. I do feel it coming back, and I appreciate you guys investing in that as well. My question, kind of as you're going through this, is really focuses on significant urban space that you're adding to the project or to the surrounding area. Is that something that was kind of immediately a part of the original vision for the project, or is it something that came out of it as an opportunity because of the structure and because of the site constraints?
There is a 10,000 square foot requirement in the zoning, and that's what we started with, and we started trying to do that at grade. And clearly doing that at grade was a challenge because so much of the site had to be given over to either transit access or our front door, our lobby. So there was not much opportunity to do quality open space at grade. And it was actually the borough president, Gail Brewer, who kind of gave us license to consider doing it above grade. And once we made that move, all sorts of possibilities opened up, and we were able to do much more than was required. But we couldn't figure out how to do quality open space at grade.
Makes sense. The other question I had for Kim, I'm a structures guy, and I was just curious, it looks as though the core is sitting above all the train tracks. Does the core continue all the way down? Does it transfer out? What's going on there? There wasn't much talk on that. I'm sure there's a lot of struggles.
Yeah, so you're right. I mean, the main structural gravity load, the big building, gravity and lateral, is using the perimeter because the majority of the core and the elevators is undercut. The western portion has a zone, and so we're using every opportunity, structural engineer, WSP, every opportunity to obviously tie to that, but it is the perimeter is doing a lot of the work in this case. Unlike a lot of the buildings that are sitting on terra firma, the central core, you kind of leverage the footprint that is there. So that was definitely one of the challenges, but it gave the opportunities as well to create kind of integrated structure architecture and urban enhancements.
So the core hangs, right?
The core hangs.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Okay.
At the lower levels, right?
Mhm.
But not all the, yeah.
Yeah. And I appreciate so much, looking at those drawings and showing the few points that you have to go down, and all you have to do is go a few blocks north and you can see what JP Morgan Chase is doing and realize the gymnastics that are being played to get a building built over those tracks. So, I think it's remarkable in this city. And John, I loved in your opening this idea that, the city had to rezone to a density that would allow you to take a building down and do a lot of probably very expensive things to create a piece of land or an opportunity to build above it. And I think you've done all that masterfully and in such a poetic way. I mean, I know it's a technical challenged just about at every corner, I'm sure, but it comes across as such an elegant and simple solution, and I do think it's going to be a landmark. I appreciate, Kim, your point about, I mean, are we all kind of tired enough of these kind of glass pyramid things? I mean, I live over on the other side of the river, and I look over at Hudson Yards, and I think to have, you know, something that blends more in with the context of Midtown is an incredible, it's a great statement. One point that's here in the Q&A, it's not a question, but it's a comment. Susan would like to thank you all for getting rid of the terrible shed over 42nd Street, which we all agree to, in the existing Grand Hyatt. So thank you for that. Let me see if there's any other questions. Jennifer has a question. To piggyback on the question, how and where does the perimeter structure land below? I know there was an earlier diagram that was shown, but anyone want to take a shot at that?
Sure. I mean, so basically early on, there was a diagram with the red kind of dots or like squares on the plan. That's basically where the gravity and the lateral system comes down. So on the south side, it's the two mega columns that are quite large. They're kind of flanking the existing subway track and tunnel. On the north side, there's a little bit more opportunities. Some have broader swaths of real estate, and other ones kind of, again, try to find real estate between the turnaround loop from Metro North and the subway.
And both the Public Design Commission, who we had to go to, and Landmarks were very interested in us expressing this sort of steel exoskeleton coming down and meeting that solid footing, and kind of showing how those two come together. So that's very much a part of the pedestrian experience at the base of the building.
Yeah. Well, I think that's what's going to make this unique. You know, the fact that you've expressed it and not hidden it. And obviously it's a powerful driver of the building. Yeah. And so that all makes sense. Okay. Last call for questions. It's just a bit after 7, so I don't want to keep anyone too late on a Wednesday. I don't see any more coming through, so I'm going to wrap up here. John, Adam, Kim, thanks again. It's an incredible project. I can't wait to see it coming out of the ground. I'm Adam, hoping you can rush things a little bit by the end of this decade. Seems like a long time, but I get it. There's a lot of complexity, but I think we're all going to enjoy seeing it come out of the ground. And good luck. Everything ahead of you, I'm sure will go incredibly well.
Thank you for having us. We're you know, as you can tell, we're really excited about this, and we are so thrilled to be having this conversation with you after, you know, these approval milestones that continue to come. So again, by the end of the year, we'll be in great shape to keep flying forward.
Perfect. All right, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Good night.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.